formally, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining Get Savvy's Lunch and Learn today, whether it is your lunch break or you're joining us from a different part of the world. I'm Matt Dunphy. I'm a lead consultant in learning and development with Get Savvy. And as you will know, you're joining the session from PDF to Powerful today, bringing your training to life using AI. So to kind of summarize what we'll cover, we're going to look at this problem of flat static content and how you transform that into dynamic learning experiences. It's a fast session, 30 minutes, so we will get going. But just as we do, I've got our team in the background here poised around the Q&A. So if you want to find your Q&A box and just let us know your role at your organization, where you're joining us from today, and also in one word, what you'd like to get out of this session, our team will track those as we move through. So please do interact with us and each other as we move through the session today. So as you're getting yourself settled and doing that, I will kind of set the agenda very briefly. For Get Savvy, we talk a lot to our clients and in the nonprofit community in the UK around a particular dilemma. Lots of organizations have vast volumes of assets, whether that's guidance documents, training materials, presentations, etc., PDF or other formats, essentially that they are desperate to transform into better learning, essentially. Now we find that it's not that the content is an issue, it's usually that it's trapped in the wrong format. And we'll expand on that as we move through today. So if we call this the flat content problem, and then just to bring in a few of the symptoms, I'm assuming and hoping that several of you have these pain points given you're joining the session, and maybe you're joining for general learning purposes. But if we think there are these volumes of content in organizations that need transformation, generally being heavily text-based, they're quite dense. That leads on the left-hand side here to an issue of retention. We all want good learning retention, and often the format of these documents means that's just not possible. Beyond key messages that you've highlighted. Over on the right-hand side, we'd probably say that, as reading material, they're good content, but they offer, no or very low interactions. And we all know as learning professionals that it really is that interactivity that increases retention, engagement, and satisfaction. And then finally, it is likely that these materials are providing a poor learning experience at the moment. Maybe they were built for another purpose originally. So there is a solution to the problem that we'll work through in a demo format today, but just to sort of share our own experiences, we're not wagging a finger here. When Get Savvy was created as a company, we had an ambition to deliver a high quality, exciting learning experience course in project management for non-project managers. We knew that was a gap. Let's say across the sector. We found we had lots of materials, whether they were presentations, various Word documents, or indeed templates that we knew we needed to convert into something more dynamic and exciting as learning. So how did we do this? Well, our team of instructional designers were experimenting with early uses of AI for learning, which have grown across the world in the last 2 to 3 years. And we managed a process of putting our course together in a highly dynamic way based on this core material. So essentially, we're sharing our experiences with you today. And before I move on any further, we do want to get a dip sample, so who's in the room with us today. So I think Alan's going to bring a poll up on screen if you'd like to answer it now. 2 quick questions, just essentially, how much does your organization have this type of content around that you're looking to transform? And the second question being then, in its current state, how much do you really believe this material in its current format is being used, valued, even remembered? So Alan will share this and we'll get an opportunity for your answers. And then I'll take a quick look as we move through. So perhaps, Alan, you let us know when you think we've hit critical mass on responses.
Great. We've got answers coming through, and I guess it's a self-selecting audience because pretty much everyone has lots of undervalued content. Well, you're in the right place. Thank you very much for that. And then we're getting a lot of comments on how much of their existing content is being used. So I'll just end that poll and share the results.
Fantastic.
Welcome your comments, Matt.
Yeah, I'll take a quick look at this. So again, as Alan suggests, probably no surprise you've self-selected to join us today. That's a very high percentage of people with these assets, valuable assets that are just looking for transformation. And I'll take a quick look here. Yeah, not great. Let's say we average out. Most of you are saying, this content is being used in some format at the moment as reading, but potentially not as valuable a learning experience as it could be. Great. So just before we move to the demo section of the session today, I just want to kind of outline what we do and how we can help. If you've got particular challenges and you do need to transform this content fast, we can certainly support you with that. As a principle of Get Savvy, we offer free education as well as our services. Key message on screen here is, if you engage with us in that process, you would always retain control. So obviously you retain control of your intellectual property that you've built with your subject matter experts. You retain control of the process somewhat, in terms of sharing with us your wishes and wants, your needs for your learners. And then it's very collaborative throughout. Again, how do we do that? Largely, it's with our instructional design team who are highly skilled at using AI features inside learning tools. And then just to move that on a little bit further, everyone's got a process, right? So in terms of what you might expect if you engage with this, classic inputs and outputs, we actually at the moment for free will take a certain of your content and take a look at it and offer you a sense of how it could be transformed. That's always going to be the inputs, the assets themselves. The bulk of this is the learning design using AI tools, and that is a highly collaborative process, as I say. We promise an output of something that's clearly structured, very visual and interactive, and flows towards good outcomes for the learner. And then we generally tend to find this can be an ongoing collaboration. There are a first tranche of assets that you need to transform. There's probably then your next priorities. So let's just bearing that in mind if you want to engage with us, how we run our process. And one last thing here, in terms of our own understanding of how this can work, we've created this idea of three levels or three engagement styles. What we find is if you've got this flat static content, generally people either need level one, which is the top here, which is just to make it more visual. It's surprising how much we still see content that's kind of in a very basic PowerPoint-esque format. So you're adding things like audio, various different charts if you're using data, and starting to just lift the whole design visually so that people enjoy it more. In the middle, which is the main thing we'll probably cover in the demo, we find this gap around interactivity. These assets, when you transform them, you want people to engage with them, to actively do things on screen to heighten their experience and retention. And probably as many of you know, if you are designers yourselves, this can be achieved very well through things like flashcards, giving people things to touch or move through on screen. And another example, say branching scenarios. So you're slightly having a tailored experience based on responses you might give to a quiz. And finally, then, if we think about immersion, the key thing here is it is immersion. It's deeper into the role of the learner or their context. It's offering an opportunity to have a deeper learning experience with your organization. And again, we'll look at this in the demo, but we tend to find that this is promoting things like deeper scenarios in the context of professionals, or things like conversations, that actually immerse people into what you're doing. And why do we do this? It is not simply just to have nice design. Again, if you're professionals out there, you appreciate this is all about retention, about outcomes, and about satisfaction. And this does lead to real return on investment for your organization. Members are retained. Donor volunteers want to stay and volunteer with you, for example, if you're a charity. So I will bring the screen down and we'll move into the demo. Just as I do that, Alan, how are questions and interactions looking? Are we getting lots of people?
Really good. Thanks everybody. We've got visitors as far afield as Canada. Really welcome. And then the most common areas of interest are to understand what's changed in the world, and what could be done now with content, and the role of AI. So people are in exactly the right place.
Great. So we'll start to move into the demo, which helpfully is all within one screen here. So I'll track through that in a moment. And I'll do things like just check that you can see this as we move through and check my sound as well.
Yeah, all good.
Um, Fantastic. So, but yeah, just leaning on what you're saying, the world of learning technology and learning tools has moved on exponentially. It is kind of faster, better, easier in terms of the power of AI tools for learning design. So we'll cover many of those features in a moment. And it is, AI in the setting, there is a level of benevolence. There are fears about AI in other quarters. We see this as an optimistic tool to use to just offer more to our members and donors. So as we move through, then what I'm going to do is this is sort of the overview of the course demo, if you like. And we'll cover 1 to 3 here today, our 3 levels of engagement style and various features I can highlight for you. So if we move into the course itself or into the demo, and we'll start with visual learning, engagement and experience. So essentially, if we want to say, this is really taking these different formats, whether it's PDF, PowerPoint, Word, anything else you've got, which is useful and certainly quality assured by your subject matter experts. It's just very flat and static. So, again, telling our own tale. As a hypothetical example, we might use something like this, which is a very flat, static, text-heavy example of good information about who Get Savvy are and how we work. What we're going to move into is how we visualize that more within our design tools using AI. First example of testing my audio. And one of the things that we're finding is really quick to develop with AI from underlying content is text to voice. It certainly cuts down on production costs. If you use members of your team or experts, it's still highly effective. So let's take a listen.
Get Savvy leverages 30 years of experience to help organizations manage technology projects effectively.
And I'll just check, Alan, that's coming through loud and clear your side?
Yeah, I can hear that. And you've chosen one of a variety of accents. Fantastic.
Yes, exactly. So a lot of what we'll continue to show is not only do you get text to voice here using AI and your underlying content, you can swap accents as Alan suggests. Or this sounds very professional. There are certain cultural moments around using avatars, but that certainly offers a really professional voice on behalf of your organization. Some of the key features that we find is kind of chunking up content. And again, the key shift here, if you're looking for it, is we would have built these features ourselves in design tools before or asked for them to be built. It would have taken much longer. Now, AI, using something like tabs, is giving us both the text and the imagery. We might be feeding that with files underneath, or it's suggesting certain imagery itself in a much quicker way. It's delivering this to us, and then our job is to go on and edit and refine it and make sure it's still appropriate to our organization. I'll show you a couple of other examples of that. Now, this is interactivity, but as you see, we fed it some of our branding, and this is Get Savvy branding, and it's developed some flashcards for us. So again, it's chunked up our content. It looks highly visual. This is done in an automated way, and basically looks great. Other things, maybe classically as well, if you're a web designer or you've come from that world or you use this already, again, you'll know the idea of using shelving or accordion style to create some more visual impact and ease of retention. Again, the important thing to say here is these were auto-generated. So it's suggesting this format using the content that we fed it. Now, animation and kind of a level of video is very powerful for visual learning engagement. I'm going to show you a couple of examples of both, heightening some video and using animation here. This is the first one coming up.
Yeah, that's all coming through.
Get Savvy is an online learning platform with a brand new way of delivering immersive learning that is currently not available anywhere else.
So simple example there, that's kind of almost promotional video for us. Imagine the level of cost and time that would have taken from scratch, say pre-AI, versus the ease that it's actually delivering something first generation to us, and that we can then adapt and edit down. I think one of the key advantages of AI for learning tools is their video creation and editing power. A simple moment, maybe we've got a static image in our branding and we want to lift it in a moment of learning for our users. We get something like this. So people dancing away, very thrilled that they've just completed our course. And then finally, then in the kind of, if you've seen it online recently, the transition of Will Smith eating noodles and the power of the quality of AI in terms of animation and video, something like this, almost like beyond creation, pre-AI. Now we're using tools that can create it again as a fun moment of learning or a visual engagement like this. So you can garner your own meaning in terms of what learning impact the mouse and the pig are having. But the important thing is to say auto-generated, easy, and impactful visually. Final example in this section of the demo, again, I'll use a piece, I'm sure Alan won't mind, of actual webinar footage. So we've talked a lot about flat content, but we're also talking about, flat files for recorded material that you can actually snippet in and include in your learning courses.
Let's get going. So first of all, a little bit about us at Get Savvy.
So I'll spare Alan's blushes, but that's us delivering a live webinar some months ago that we've snipped in and edited using AI in here. And finally, another cool feature of the tools is it's taken the transcript from the actual webinar, and again, it's just chunked up and made more impactful and more easy to retain the content from that webinar. So quick time check. The key point here, good for time, is on the visual learning engagement, this level 1 of engagement style. We have started with something that is very flat and has very little impact. And through some easy steps and process, we've created a highly visual engagement for the learner. I did say we covered the interaction learning engagement a little bit more today. I'm going to look at that now. The other thing I'll feed to you as a cue is learning in context is really important. If you're a professional membership body, you have different industries, different professionals. If you're a charity, you might have different focus points for your volunteers as learners. So important to say we're going to look at some examples and actually look at industry here as well. So essentially, the first thing I'm going to say, the first feature on screen is a quiz. We all know we've created them simple multiple choice or single choice questions. The beauty here is AI is helping us create something very visually impactful that offers interaction. So I'm going to pick a character here. Let's say we continue, and we'll suggest this is a construction industry example. All that's happening here is we've been asked a simple question and we are responding, but the interactive impact is much higher given the design tools using the AI features. Another one here, interaction through conversation. Probably, again, as learning and development professionals, we all know immersing people in a real scenario is key. So I'm able to move through what essentially is a kind of line of duty-esque, if you get the quote, example of whether we raid a criminal's location or not. Quick question, check your understanding. And again, another cool feature is AI is helping us with these question responses. Again, certainly as a designer, I've had to spend the time to add these to each question permutation ad nauseum. Again, as long as your underlying theory and content is correct, AI is creating these automatically for you now to just check. Again, sharing the experience, we've all been there on using smart art or something similar, Visio, to create a process flow. No matter what we do, it can still look a bit flat. So this is an auto-generated process in the example of water treatment. The learning is interactive. It's allowing us to understand each section of the process. The visual impact and the interactivity is very high. And assuredly, this has been created very easy. So we're working more in our preference, whether this layout or another one that AI has suggested helps. But it's done much quickly and is very relevant for the learner. Just to say, these things still exist. We still have things that we create very easily using learning tools that can just be a break from a lot of interactivity. This is about to Get Savvy's principles. So this, again, has been fed by the underlying content. It's created the quiz and it's created the correct response to reinforce our learning. And then a nice feature here, not promising I will be able to get this right. I'll have to remember. But, again, to have a break from something more simple, we've got the drag and drop here, auto-suggested, auto-corrected, created by AI. And we still get that learning moment of how many of these we've got right. So I've got a couple of those incorrect, but I could take that again. and refine my learning and understanding as a standard. And finally, for the sector, we do know a lot of organizations have this need to ask the learner to provide text to confirm their understanding. That still exists. So I suppose what we're saying is you've got this combination of some very highly interactive AI features and some of the standards that are still available. Yet overall, in this second scenario, we're focusing more on interactivity using people's role and context. And again, we're using the AI features just to create things more quickly and more impactfully. Great. I know this is pacey, but we're going to look at the third and the deepest examples now, which is immersive learning experience. This is my favorite because even as we shift more from physical learning to hybrid learning or more online learning, could be economical for an organization as well as easier for the user, the idea of immersion is still critical. And what I'll talk about here is whether you're in an online space or indeed a physical space, the level of immersion that can be achieved. Again, an example here, let's say you're looking at a younger learner, or you just want, again, an impactful moment of immersion around a key message. We can create something like this using AI. I think this is hugely impressive and much, much more easier than engaging a team of animators, pre-AI. And that's not to suggest those other, skill sets shouldn't exist anymore. We shouldn't, complement those. It's just about balance of your time, capacity, and resources. Any Star Wars fans out there, spatial awareness and spatial investigation is an immersive tactic. So you get various ways here to actually look at the space and understand various elements, R2-D2 included. But again, you'll hear the chorus message, auto-generated or suggested from our underlying content, and then easily adaptable and refined thereafter. Again, this is an example of literature. But the key reason I'll show you this here is in a very easy interactive way, we can kind of correct our answers before we submit. So I think doing a little bit of immersive learning around the quotes, I can submit and get my correct answer here. Fantastic. And then just to move on to a few examples, as I said, of actually almost combining all elements, highly visual, interactive, and immersive. We've got a feature like this, which I sort of feel like could be in a museum setting. So if I come back to the beginning, it's allowing you to walk through the story. We all know that learning is very important. This is in vogue at the minute because we've had the recent moon landings. Walking through a space mission story, potentially that could be set into a museum setting or a gallery. And one more, again, Kew Gardens, the Royal Horticultural Society. Other examples exist, but you might be seeing this in space. And again, you're reading as you walk through a gallery or museum, and you're actually able to track the various elements of looking after a monstera. So again, just showing you that these are key ways to create immersion, potentially in a live space. Finally, just a couple of features here from Get Savvy's course. I said we'd look at this. We believe our course is very immersive. We spent the time to make sure it's like that. So let's have a couple of elements of that.
During this important stage, you'll be working closely with all your stakeholders across the organization. Select each role to hear from them.
So what we're doing here is we're setting up the idea of AI avatars as tutors. We do use that a lot in our courses. And we were using this when it was pioneering software, much easier to put these together now. And then just as Alan suggested it, we've got the various characters of your project team here. This is an Irish example. I am Irish, so I'm going to bias myself and listen to Aidan for a second.
Hi, Aidan here, one of the end users. At this stage, we will inform our business area leads if there are any issues that will impact the go-live. We will also be involved in training.
So again, you get a lifelike, text-to-voice, accented a member of your project team. A couple of extra features that are immersive from our course that I show you. We set up this whole dashboard now to pretend that you are a project manager before you actually need to go on and do it as a business person. So things like we share templates and then just allowing the user to click through when they've created and finished their templates. So this is more kind of classic learning designed to accompany the avatars, which are AI features. And then finally, if we go to our own check your understanding, I'll fast forward through the speech here.
Don't forget to download and complete your...
Actually, this one here. This is kind of approaching our final assessment in the
Now
course.
that you have completed this module,
so I'll just move that so that I can actually share these with you. We've created a racetrack design, the idea of immersion as you move through the various questions towards completion. And then what I would say is we've gotten simpler here on the questions. Single option format here. That's correct. And then I know I can now move on to the next stage. I won't do all of these, but I'll show you this one. Simple multiple choice questions here that I can answer. But the important thing is I'm immersed in this idea of the gamification and getting to the end. And again, what we're finding now with AI tools is a lot of these questions, answers, responses, as I say, can be auto-generated using our underlying content from a flat format. So essentially that's the demo. But again, just to say for this third one, this is using flat static content underneath, truly just using files that you have or you've created, feeding them into the learning tools with AI and getting these hugely impactful immersive features in response. So I'll quickly move back to our deck. We're kind of moving to the close of the session now. Again, as I do, Alan, any further kind of thoughts from the group today?
The main one was really about there's a couple of questions about how to get going with this stuff. So understanding it's now changed, how do you get going to where does it fit in? So I think that I think that ties to what you're talking about now.
Yeah, and to be very transparent, we'll talk a little bit more before we finish about our services. We offer a fast, affordable, collaborative approach to doing this. What we find as a client pain point is the need to do it in a big leap. To get somewhere new with your learning fast, knowing you've got these volumes of content. Transparently, if you're doing this autonomously, it's investigating the learning tools that are out there and understanding them. And sometimes that's adding skills on your side. And I think what we find as a challenge is if you're truly going to do it yourself or you're going to do some of it and we help you, it's about eking out the capacity, proving the capacity needed to do this, which is better than before. But we know learning managers can be very busy with the business side of the role. Couple of final things. So in terms of our approach, maybe some commitments, we are, as you've seen, as Get Savvy, looking for, high interaction, engagement and retention. We are collaborative. So we treat you as a subject matter experts. We treat your content as expert content. We are the experts in the AI tools and learning design. And we're obviously deploying several of those through our processes. And there's no lock-ins to engaging with us. Often we find we work in a kind of a sprint or a project by project basis. And then, as you say, you always naturally retain control over your content itself, over your strategy, and over how you engage with us and what your learners need. All of that is to create higher impact for the learner. That's what we believe in, as I'm sure you do as well. Ways to sort of engage with us. You can set up a 15-minute call with us after this very easily. As I say, we're actually receiving content at the moment in a safe way and offering a suggestion of how we might transform it. So that's something you could also consider. And then just to say, I think we'll be able to share this afterwards, but to move through it, we have a pricing table that makes it easier to understand the commitment and investment. What we find is two things. People tend to start in the visual impact space, start with a pilot to create something more visually impactful with us, between about £2,000 to £4,000. And then the world's our oyster. We can move on there in line with your ambitions. The other thing is we can say for definite that this is percentages more economical than it's been pre-AI, or that we've even seen, say, 2 years ago. This is getting into space where we can support clients in a very economical way. Some final things. We are going to share the recording today. I will check, but I think pricing table as well. And we love your feedback. But before you go, and before I tell you about other webinars coming up, Lunch and Learns, and we'd love if you could just share a moment of how you found the session today, and indeed whether you want to get in touch with us immediately about some of this support. I think as Alan does that, just to say thank you if you've been to our February Lunch and Learn. And if your intention is to attend more, please do join us. We've got spaces. In July, we're going to look at things that are, what if you've got a course now, but you want to modernize it using AI? And then later in the year, in October, we're going to look at budget factors. How you really make this fit the budget you've got, great or small. So that's our feedback on screen. Please do, before you drop off, as you are engaging with how the session's been, give us your feedback. And thank you. It's been a pleasure, a rapid session today, as always. But we look forward to seeing you again. And we hope we've given you some tips to go back away with to your teams, to your leadership group today, immediately. Thank you.